The Rhythm Heaven games are something truly special. They manage to take seemingly any scenario imaginable and can somehow turn it into its own song. When it comes to charm and creativity, these games truly are unmatched when it comes to any other rhythm experience out there. Which got me thinking, why not compare each and every one of these titles, ranking them in order to figure out which game in this series is the very best. As you would expect from such a diverse lineup, my opinions will very likely differ from others out there, so by all means feel free to let me hear your rankings down in the comments. I'm always down to talk more Rhythm Heaven. And with all that out of the way, let's get right into this list. Kicking things off at number 5, it's MegaMix. Now I know what you're thinking, but please hear me out. There is no such thing as a bad Rhythm Heaven game. Every title in this series is amazing, so even one at the bottom of this list is still a good time and is well worth playing. The quality of standard we're dealing with is just much higher compared to other games out there, but anyway, let's first outline MegaMix's positives with what it gets right. For starters, it's still the most stacked release to come out, featuring 70 songs from past entries with 30 all new tracks, making for 100 mini-games in total, which is even more than Groove. A lot of its new songs are great, like Lumberjacks, First Contact, and probably my favourite of the bunch, Pajama Party, which really wants you to know it's on the 3DS with its unique perspective. MegaMix also features an actual story, first in this series, having NPCs with some pretty great localization and dialogue. It's not a particularly deep narrative, but it doesn't have to be. I've heard online that some people don't like these dialogue exchanges and just want to get into the songs, but they're harmless at best and are pretty amusing most of the time. Seeing actual world building is kinda cool and is something I can appreciate. I wouldn't mind seeing something like it attempted again in the future. On paper, this is technically the best game in the series, however its execution in my opinion is kind of lacking. I wouldn't exactly call MegaMix a definitive release by any means. A lot of its returning tracks just aren't as fun to play on the 3DS. Most songs, as you'd expect from FIFA, have been compressed visually, with them also lacking the limited yet satisfying remote layout. And they kinda butchered the amazing touchscreen control scheme that the DS had for its songs, which just aren't as intuitive or fun to play in my opinion. I mean, they spent years implementing this concept, and I don't think MegaMix did them any justice here. Also, this installment is definitely the easiest in this series, so depending on whether or not this is your first time getting into these types of games, this can either be a good or bad thing. To me, its more handhold in nature is a bit of a detriment to its experience. This is since you're forced to play previous songs in this downgraded easy mode before actually playing them properly, and they don't even alter these in a way that sounds good, they poorly affect MegaMix's pacing. Also, the way these tracks are ordered is so confusing. You play Hole in One, the first track in FIFA and the easiest from that game, way later on in MegaMix, which is strange. Despite being a best of compilation, some of the choices in this title are pretty debatable. I swear you play Figure Fighter like 4 times in this intro, and there's no Love Lab, Drummador, DJ School, Tap Trope, or even Crop Stomp in this game. Legendary songs to name a few are omitted here in favour for some that I'd personally say did not deserve getting in over them. But to top off all these criticisms is what I think is the biggest crime MegaMix runs into, which is the very reason it's at the bottom of this list, and it's the simple fact that its remixes are the weakest in this series. None really stood out to me outside of its final one, which is a nice send off to all the games that came out up until the point of this title's release. But I mean, I can't say I wanted to replay any of them outside of the initial playthrough, which isn't an issue I have with any other games in this series. On a more positive note, however, I have to give credit where credit is due. I do like the visual differences they went with these remixes. Quite a lot of them are customized, which I can appreciate, with them having some pretty neat callbacks referencing previous games and NPCs. Overall, MegaMix is still an excellent experience today, and in many ways is the best starting point if you're looking into getting into this series, acting as a decent compilation that only starts to show its flaws when you compare it to the rest of its peers. At number 4, it's Rhythm Tengoku, the game that started it all. It's surprisingly aged remarkably well nowadays. Sure, it has what many, including myself, would say are the worst rhythm games in the series, like Quiz and especially Rapman. Seriously, I can't time this one for the life of me. But where Tengoku truly shines is how it pioneered this series into what it is today. Its remixes are just solid overall, with 3 and 5 being standout examples, having vocal songs covering J-pop as well as rock, which are pretty impressive hearing from a Game Boy Advance of all things. I'm also a fan of the lyrical songs here, they're very catchy despite being simple melodies. Even mini games that don't quite hit the mark like the Bonadora are amazing and catchy despite being awful to actually play. Whilst MegaMix is more consistent with its quality and is a more content-dense package, the big reason I put Tengoku over it is despite having lower lows in comparison with some of its tracks, those are few and very far between. Tengoku for me has much higher highs, which is why it stands just slightly above MegaMix with its ranking. It's also just paced much better, with some rhythm games not even requiring a tutorial, which might be intimidating to some at first, but it really helps in keeping its flow going. Tengoku trusts much more that the player will eventually adapt to its gameplay instead of gradually reeling in the user with watered down minigames in order to understand how they're played. Its presentation is also just stellar, having some incredible sprite art from a bygone era that pushes the GBA to its limits. Overall, whilst it might be rough around the edges to some, Tengoku proved that this concept for a rhythm game absolutely had legs and would walk onwards to become even better, forming into the beloved series that we all know and love today. Number 3, Rhythm Heaven, or Paradise if you're from PAL regions like me. The very first entry to make its way overseas for the DS, and it's still the most creative. You really have to play this one on actual hardware, since the tactile control scheme you get with its touch and swipe gestures can't be found anywhere else and is terrible on emulators. I can effortlessly play lockstep like this, but the second you map that minigame to a button, I just can't keep the flow for whatever reason, it just doesn't feel right. Rhythm Heaven DS is also by far the hardest in this series in my opinion. Its ranking system can be outright brutal at times, demanding a lot out of the player. Which makes it all the more funnier that this is the first game we ever got in the West and is the first I'd ever played, which I'm sure is the same for many others out there. And even despite its challenge from tracks like Frog Hop, Mawai Dewap and the aforementioned Lockstep, these games are so fun as well as catchy to listen to that you can't not put them down until they're truly mastered. DS also has my biggest vocal stim out of the series, with fan clubs I suppose. I swear a neuron activates whenever I hear the phrase said in real life.
I suppose.
I seriously have to hold back the urge to repeat the phrase at the cost of looking like a weirdo in public, which I'm pretty sure is a problem a lot of other Rhythm Heaven fans can relate to. But anyway, moving back to DS as a whole, none of its rhythm games are bad. I do have some small nitpicks with their length though. Frog Hop's vocals, whilst being amazing, can make it tricky to hear some of its audio cues, not to mention the tapping can strain your muscles after a while. But problems like that aren't really a big issue and are more of a personal complaint which won't affect most players. I do think though, probably this title's weakest aspect is that upon listening to its remixes back to back, I noticed that like MegaMix, none of them feature any vocal tracks. Which is a bit strange in retrospect since a lot of the individual minigames do feature them and Tengoku had a good number of them for its remixes. On a similar note, for the remixes in DS, they only really start getting good after 5, with remixes 9, 10 and especially 8 being standout examples of incredible tracks that are equally just as fun to listen to as they are to play. If I was being more critical towards this release, then I'd say sure, Tengoku does have the better remixes in comparison, but the songs in DS are so much more creative and enjoyable for me personally, which is what puts the title above it on this list. In second place, we have the latest release to come out with Rhythm Heaven Groove. Where do I even begin with this one? So this title had the longest wait between entries, with fans waiting over a decade for it to come out. As a result of this, I feel like fans seem to be rather mixed on Groove as a whole. One moment I'll hear how it's the best in the series and the next how it's just terrible. So why not just weigh in on this discourse surrounding Groove with my own opinion on it? After replaying every Rhythm Heaven game in release order for the purposes of this video, I found out with Groove I liked its songs much more on a second playthrough. It's hard to explain, but something really clicked with me the second time around. I started to really enjoy rhythm games like Pop Don't Drop. Hop Stop and Roll has a really nice vocal backing track, and I know this might be a bit of a hot take to some, but Brolly Good Show with all its covers is just a way better version of Clappy Clappers. I was never really a fan of that minigame despite it being a fan favourite. You also have Fruit Flex, which is a lovely feel-good kind of track, and Shouting Lemon is slowly making its way into my list of vocal stims. And I mean, on a blind playthrough, nothing can prepare you for the absolute whiplash of Hi-Fi Fever after finishing its tutorial. tutorial. This is the funniest game in the series. I had a genuine laughing fit once all those stock photos came up and failed my first attempt. It's so out there and unexpected. There's also Alien Alphabet, which feels almost like a sequel to First Contact, which is another standout song. Groove's roster of amazing tracks honestly just goes on. I think where this title feels like it's pushing the series forward is how it really wants the player to learn and appreciate music. Multiple times throughout its minigames, things will glitch out or become obscured, forcing the player to actually rely on audio cues opposed to its visuals, which is something previous titles attempted like with Lockstep, but never to this degree before. Groove will even blend multiple rhythm songs together, having you play them at the same time during its remixes, which pushes the player even more compared to previous entries and feels like a natural evolution for its gameplay. Even if its ranking system might be on the more generous side at the cost of not wanting to scare away newcomers. I feel like Groove still has a good bit of challenge to it with these moments that obscure and throw players off guard. Also, on a side note, Groove is the first title in this series that finally got rid of those stupid sound effects that will play whenever you'd fail an input. Seriously, these were so annoying and made it needlessly harder to hear the music and get back in rhythm. But moving on to Groove's remixes, and I don't know how to feel about them as a whole. It's a nice surprise seeing them getting doubled in this title to 20, but it seems to be at the cost of a lot of them being more subdued and forgettable. This isn't the case for all of them though. I absolutely love Remix Hate, it's easily up there with the best in the series, and might be why others just don't hit as hard since they peak relatively early and create this high standard that's never reached again by the remixes that come afterwards. Some of them are still fun, like Remix 9 having it psych the player out with many games they haven't even played up until that point, which is another memorable moment that comes to mind when thinking about Groove. A lot of these remixes use techno music, which isn't exactly common for this series and might be why they aren't as in your face as they were in previous titles. Also, for the grand finale, Remix 20 is kinda lacking despite being the big send-off, which is something every other title seemed to nail, which is sad to see here. On another negative note, like with MegaMix, Groove runs into a similar issue where there are just too many tutorials, especially with the flipside songs, which is supposed to be the harder minigames unlocked after having some kind of mastery over its gameplay, but they still feature tutorials. Alright, I have one last complaint aimed at Groove, and it's one I've seen a few people make online. It's its bizarre choices when it comes to button mapping certain actions. Like in Stop, Drop and Roll, it's strange how you can't tap down to do a roll and instead have to input forwards, which never feels right in my head. Maybe this is coming from the muscle memory of playing 2D Sonic games. But there are other examples of this, and it can get all the more frustrating during remixes where it's easy to forget what button the secondary input was mapped to. This is an issue they already fixed in FIFA on the Wii 2 games ago with its simple setup of only using A and B, so I have no idea why it's a problem in Groove. Hopefully a patch will solve this slight annoyance sometime in the future. Alright, so I've been a tad negative on Groove in this video despite putting it so high on this list. Some of you may be thinking why Groove is above other entries when I had less issues with them. Well, that's a simple question that I can answer. It's because Beat Spell exists, which is easily the best part of Groove. I'm serious when I say this. It's a mode that absolutely deserves its own spin-off game, I'm telling ya. I could easily make a video talking about what makes it so great alone. The way it combines rhythm gameplay with JRPG level design is genius. It's surprisingly in-depth with it introducing new spell combos and mechanics such as dodging attacks later on in its levels, and it's also very replayable, which is something any rhythm game needs, with it having branching paths as well as different builds you can go for until you get that perfect run. There's nothing quite like it out there, and as a die-hard JRPG fan, it's oddly enough become one of my favourites to come out of this year. I can't say I expected that out of a rhythm game of all things, but I'll have to move on here since, like I said before, I could easily go on about Rhythm Spell for hours. Alright, we finally made it to number 1, and easily the greatest game in this series has to be Rhythm Heaven Fever. I only have but one complaint for this title, and it's not even from the game itself. My only problem comes from the terrible name we got for it over in Europe and PAL regions. Beat the Beat? What the hell does that even mean? This was so confusing back in the day, and I'm sure I'm not alone on this. But anyway, now that I've said my piece on one obscure bit of information, let's discuss why Fever is easily the best in this series. To put it simpler, no song is bad out of its lineup. Every remix is memorable and slaps so hard. I mean, everyone knows about Remix 10, even if you've never played these games. Remix 10 is the most iconic thing to come out of Rhythm Heaven with all its edits and animations online. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Even today I can appreciate FIFA's simple yet intuitive button scheme. It uses the Wii Remote really well and doesn't overcomplicate anything. Some of my personal favourite mini-games from this title have to be cheerleaders, once again the vocal stems. There's also Air Rally, which is such a creative scenario, a cat and dog playing badminton in the skies. I don't know why, but there's something so pure and pleasant about this visual, not to mention the music is killer. And who would I be not bringing up Ringside in this section? The rhythm game that first comes to mind when I think of this series. It's silly, but what makes these mini games so special is how they can somehow turn anything into a song, and Ringside really is what you get when this concept is used in ways you'd never expect hearing being pulled off. Honestly, FIFA is just perfect. I mean, I've not even covered the remixes for it yet, and do I even have to? Chances are you're watching this video as a fellow die-hard fan, and like, what could I even say that hasn't been said about them at this point? They have nice visual themes and each and every one of them is a bop, but of course my personal favourites are Remix 3, 10 of course, 8 and 9. God, Beautiful One Day is just so good. It just has such nice lyrics that are uplifting, and the way it uses Screwbot Factorhead to make these spacey mechanical noises is just chef's kiss. Definitely my personal favourite remix out of the series at the moment if we're comparing all of them. FIFA is also just paced really well as a whole. Its tutorials don't take long, and even nowadays, despite being over 15 years old on a standard definition system, its visuals and animations haven't aged a day. It just sucks that the game is pretty expensive to buy physically nowadays, and I doubt we'll ever see a re-release come out anytime in the future. And there you have it from my list ranking every Rhythm Heaven game out there. With some time I could see Groove's placement possibly changing since it's still early days for it and my opinion hasn't been fully formed yet. But for the time being, this list is what I believe to be the best and worst of the series. Once again, feel free to let me hear your placements down in the comments, let's keep things civil. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, any support for this channel is always appreciated. Take care and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.